Or if the bomb that drops on you gets your friends and neighbors too, there'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know.
Hello, and thank you for watching the John Doe Prepper channel. I'm your host, John A. Whitman, and today's video is a subscriber request. I have been asked to talk about food stockpiling. So I'm going to go over the different types of foods that I personally stockpile, and I'm going to kind of go over the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. I'm not necessarily going to go straight down the line as you see them here. I'm just going to kind of go with whichever ones kind of feel like they would be a good order, sort of following each other. So I'm going to start out with kind of the starter level prepper stockpile, which would be just basic old canned goods that you would get at the grocery store. The main advantage of a lot of these items is that, like for example with this corned beef hash, this is already fully cooked and just ready to eat. So if you had to eat this cold, you could. But other canned items like this tomato soup, this is condensed. You would have to mix this with water or milk to get it to the right consistency. Like, could you eat this condensed? Yes. Is it gonna taste all that good? Probably not. And then especially if you're like me and you like to have this condensed tomato soup with milk, then if you just eat it condensed without the milk, you're actually losing quite a bit of nutritional value, because now it doesn't have all that, fat and calcium in there that it would get from the milk. But main advantages of these, like I said, they're cheap, readily available. They do last a while. They do have expiration dates. Typically, from what I've heard, you should rotate these out about every 2 years. So if this has been sitting in my stockpile for 2 years, I should probably eat this and just buy a new can of corned beef hash, right? Same goes with the soup. But they will last longer than that. It's been documented that canned goods, same thing with like MREs and stuff like that, which I'm about to go over next. Canned goods will last a lot longer than they say they will. But of course, then the kind of counterpoint to that is, do you want to risk eating something way past its expiration date and it potentially not being good anymore? Moving on to, I don't have any like military MREs left. I ate them all on camping trips, but I do still have HDRs, or Humanitarian daily rations. These, in my opinion, are the best way to go for these type of meals. They're made by the same companies that make military rations, but these are way cheaper most places, and they also contain way more food. An HDR is a 24-hour ration. It contains enough food for the whole day and night, whereas like a typical military or civilian MRE here in the US is a 12-hour ration, so you need to have 2 of them per day. This, you only need to have 1 per day, and they're way cheaper. You can get these basically anywhere from like $9 all the way up to like $15, depending on where you get them from. Meanwhile, a typical civilian or military MRE, like the little 12-hour ones, are typically anywhere from like $25 to $35, depending on where you buy them. So these are a lot cheaper. However, the disadvantage of these is because they're meant to be dropped to humanitarian zones all around the world, they are also designed to not contravene religious dietary restrictions of any religion. So they're, vegetarian, kosher, halal, all that stuff. And so there's no meat anywhere in any HDR. So if you want this type of meal, these, MRE retort pouch type meals, and you want them to actually have meat, then you need to spend more to get the military or civilian MREs. That being said, the cheapest way to get those is to buy them like this, like just the entree in the retort pouch, instead of buying a full ration. Similar to the canned goods, the advantage of these is that, These are just ready to eat. I could literally tear this open right now and just eat it cold. But you can also heat them up and then they taste a little bit better. Also, much like the canned goods, these have a relatively short official shelf life, but they will last a very long time after that. Also, obviously, kind of the nice thing with these is they're obviously a lot taller than the cans this way and wider, but with this very slim form factor, I could probably stack like 8 of these up in the room that like 2 or 3 of these soup cans would take up. So these are a much more compact way to do it. And you can buy just these MRE entrees in bulk. So if you want to go this route, that's the way to do it. Buy just the entrees in bulk because it's way cheaper. Unless you go with HDRs. If you want the full ration, go with an HDR because they contain more food for less money. Moving on to what I would say is probably the best option for preppers on a tight budget. I add this little thing of bouillon cubes to mine as kind of a way to just have an instant broth if I don't have any meat or anything on hand to make a broth with. Also, yes, I know this bucket is not food grade, but in my specific case, that is fine for sort of a stopgap solution since all the stuff in here is still in the original bags, which are food grade. I will eventually get an actual food grade bucket, and then I'll still keep this on the original bags. But basically, you want a hard container like this to store these kind of things in because moths can eat through just the plastic bags themselves and start to start to nom on your food, which is not great. Can I get this open with one hand? Yes, I can. So this is a 5-gallon bucket with this little threaded O-ring cap. And in here, these are just like old military beverage base powders, although you need to add sugar to these, but these make like 5 gallons of basically military grade Kool-Aid each. These are not what I'm here to talk about. This is also not what I'm here to talk about. This is a seed bank. If you want a video on this specifically, let me know in the comments below. This is a great prep to have. Also not what we're here to talk about today. As you can see, underneath all that, this bucket is filled with literally nothing but rice. I have jasmine rice, I have just plain white rice, and I also have some wild rice in here. I also have, they aren't in here because I wanted extra room to put this crap in there, but I also have like an ammo can full of bags of like navy beans and stuff like that. And some of those do come with their own little packets of basically bouillon powder. But yeah, these do not. So I have that little thing of bouillon cubes. And obviously you could supplement this with growing vegetables, make vegetable broth to cook this rice or the beans in. Or, you know, you hunt a squirrel and then you make squirrel broth or, you know, deer broth, whatever. So there's ways to kind of supplement this nutritionally, but this is kind of the cheapest solution that has a very long shelf life. Is you get rice and you get beans that are obviously dry goods. You keep them sealed in their original bags, and then you just put them in ideally a food grade bucket. But like I said, I couldn't find one at the time, and because these bags are still food grade and are still sealed, that's okay for now. Not a long-term solution, but once I can actually find a place selling them nearby or just buy some online when I have the money, I will get an actual food grade bucket and then move all this rice and crap into that. The upside to this is rice and beans are very cheap, even often cheaper than canned goods or MRE entrees for like just the sheer weight of stuff that you're getting per dollar, basically. The downside is on their own, they are quite nutritionally lacking. So you should ideally have other things to supplement them, even if that literally means just having like a bottle of multivitamins or something, right? Or ideally, obviously, like I said, hunting or fishing or gardening or something to add like vegetables, meat, that sort of stuff. Also, wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe have some spices or something in here just so it doesn't taste like water all the time. Speaking of, that is another disadvantage of this, is that you need to store extra water to actually be able to cook all of the beans and rice, because obviously they're not edible in their dry state like this. And speaking of things that you need water to make edible, that brings us to our final category of prepper stockpile food, that being freeze-dried food. This particular bucket is made by Augustin Farms. From what I hear, they are a fantastic brand. It comes in this little sealed bucket. It had a seal, but I took the seal off. But this one little bucket contains 48 hours of food for 4 people. So obviously, if you have a group smaller than 4 people, like me, that'll last even longer. But the main advantage of freeze-dried food is it lasts super long. Not like, canned goods or rice or beans or MRE entrees, as in like it'll last longer than they say it will. I mean, they literally say, this particular kit says it will last for, I believe, 35 years. If I recall correctly, which of course, once again, means it'll probably last even longer than that. But when your guaranteed shelf life is that long, that is fantastic. Also, because it's freeze-dried, all the moisture and everything's been taken out of it. So as you can tell, it is quite compact. Just this one little bucket will feed 4 people for 2 whole days. That being said, this has the same disadvantage that stocking up on beans and rice does, that you need to store extra water to be able to actually rehydrate these meals. Otherwise, they're kind of just not edible. And also, this is, of course, one of the more expensive options for stockpile food. Of these 4 categories I've sort of gone over, I would say this is probably the most expensive. If we were going from cheapest to most expensive, just in terms of the sheer amount of food you get per dollar, I would say beans and rice are the cheapest. Canned goods are the second cheapest. MRE entrees, HDRs, those are the third cheapest. Military and civilian MREs, which I don't have here, would be 4th. And then right at 5th place for cheapest. So in other words, the most expensive out of these 5 options, the 4 I have here, plus the one that's directly related to these, but technically not present, would be freeze-dried food. So those are just some things to think about, kind of pros and cons to weigh about which type of food you should be stockpiling. As you can see, I kind of have a little bit of everything, because I do believe that the pros and cons of all these different foods kind of help complement each other, like the canned goods, the MRE entrees, the HDRs. Those, I believe, are kind of better for more short-term disasters, especially with the actual MRE entrees. These are obviously fantastic for putting in like bug-out bags and stuff like that. These are much easier to travel with because that's kind of what they were designed for. But canned goods and these, great for short-term stuff. These, like I just said, great for travel. Whereas stuff like beans and rice and freeze-dried food is kind of better for more long-term disasters or bug-in situations where you're kind of just hunkering down in one spot and staying there. So, in my opinion, having both of these sort of categories, like short-term kind of just ready-to-eat stuff, and then the long-term not quite ready to eat but keeps for much longer type stuff, having both categories, in my opinion, is a good idea. With all that being said, hopefully this video has been helpful to you, especially to that one subscriber in particular who requested this video specifically. Hopefully it's given you some helpful things to kind of think about and factor in to your preps. And with all that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching the John Doe Prepper channel.
We will all go suffused with an incandescent glow. No one will have the endurance to collect on his insurance. Lloyds of London will be loaded when they go.